Welp, I had a fun intro written up about today's topic, ready to share my excitement with all of you about the demo for Evenicle 2, maybe poke a little harmless fun at Manga Gamer in the process, but I wrote it up on the night of the release, went to sleep, woke up, community's on fire. First things first, most of this video is not going to be negative because as far as the game is concerned, I like what's on offer, but oh lord, the bumpy USPS ride that is Localization was not without its bumps for the fragile box called Evenicle 2, and one particular crack in the demo might be a deal breaker if it isn't patched by the time the full release comes around. And for those not in the know, this title's localization is particularly interesting because rather than go through a separate Western company like Manga Gamer, who at the time of this video was the go-to for Alicesoft localizations and still is in terms of the Rant series, Alicesoft decided to forge their own path to a Western release. So yeah, I'm going to talk about that as well as my thoughts on the game, but I'm going to try to keep the two topics mutually exclusive from each other since, well, this meme sums up my perspective quite well. Honestly though, I think a person's perception can be affected by what they hear first, so while I am going to start with the localization, if that is not what you want to hear, or you just want to come out of the gate more positive, here's a time code for my thoughts on the actual game. And for everyone else, let's get started. General localization is as good a place as any to start, I guess. And to be honest, not gonna linger on this part of the topic. I'm generally not super critical of localizations word by word, simply because I don't know much Japanese. Very little of the dialogue seemed out of place, or out of place enough for me to notice anyway, aside from a few meme lines that, with my rudimentary understanding, still seem like they fit the intent. And hey, they made me laugh, so I'm not gonna make a big deal out of it. With that said, if you are an old school super weeb like me and hope that a Japanese company holding the reins on the localization would result in things like honorifics making a return or jokes maintaining their Japanese origin with maybe an explanation attached so you can learn a bit about Japanese culture if you didn't already, yeah, none of that is present here. Heck, we even got a few name changes in this localization. I thought that practice had died out back in the 4Kids years. To the localization's credit, the Alicesoft English Twitter account does address this aspect with a reasonable answer, but it still means that yet again superweaves like me are left out in the cold. Ultimately, it's another localization, just like all the others, professionally done, the UI looks very nice without any overflowing text, but nothing to make more niche consumers appreciate the localization any more than all the others on the market. Which is kinda funny because mosaics! They have made a return to the Alicesoft localizations. Not something I personally care about, but hey, some people really do care. A lot of people really do care. There really isn't much to say here at all, but I do want people to understand that when asking for unmosaic CGs, this is a Japanese company heading things. There are Japanese laws against the practice and penalties for breaking them, but beyond that, in many cases, you aren't simply asking them to take off the mosaics. Sometimes, or maybe a lot of the time, there is simply nothing there, and the process of getting unmosaic CGs is actually them paying a separate artist to go in and draw in the missing elements. A process that takes time and money, and if you think about it, unmosaicing a game could be seen as a form of localization for all those people who want to purely translate a game without Western influences. I don't know, food for thought. Okay, now we can get to the important topic, the real reason for all those negative reviews on the Steam page. Removed content. One of my pet peeves is censorship in video games, and removing parts of a game is pretty much the top of the list. For those who don't know, one scene was removed in Evenicle 2's trial, most likely because of Steam's anti-lolly rule, and replaced with a unvoiced text-only recollection of the event. It's actually quite seamless. Aside from the ending transitioning the scene to exactly the same scene for no reason, if you didn't know the content was removed, you probably wouldn't notice at all. That's a major blow to my confidence in this localization, made worse by the fact that this was only addressed by the official Twitter account after people had already discovered the change. There was no effort to preempt this controversy. I guess they thought it might affect how the reception of the game was, but this is a demo, why not just come out the gate with a proper explanation of how Steam's rules might affect the product? Or maybe they were just testing the waters with how quickly people would notice removed scenes from the eventual release. But that's just speculation, and admittedly a pretty mean one at that, but doubt is what gets generated from stunts like this one. And on the note of speculation, while the Twitter response to this claims that, quote, we're mildly, keyword mildly, optimistic that it will be the only change from the original that will also be present in the full game we're working to release on Steam in the future, I've seen a number of people bring up other parts of the game that have a good chance of needing to be cut for the Steam release. I mean, I guess it's fair to say the tweet does point out, quote unquote, mildly optimistic, but from what I can glean, there are worries that Chapter 2 might just get gutted over this. What really frustrates me though was the final tweet in this tweet chain thread whatever, where the account says, I'm talking with multiple digital distribution companies to try and secure a way to let you have a fully uncut version of the game on a different platform. The hell do you mean by talking? Excuse me for being blunt here, but I think the appropriate term would be talked. Because there is no fucking reason this skyscraper of a roadblock couldn't be seen from a mile away. Steam's history with censoring anime games is well documented at this point. It's been a fucking year since the Rape Day controversy that indirectly hit Alicesoft, and plenty of other games have run afoul of Steam's enforcement, some justified, some not so much. To be fair, discussion like this should have happened at the start of the localization process for this game, even if the primary goal was a Steam release. Okay, I've calmed down, and you know what? Quote, talking is generic PR speak, so there is no way to know when, quote, talking has started or when it will end. I'm gonna keep that burst of rage, or at least a portion of it, in the video though, because that's my frustration with this entire thing at its zenith. But you know what's fucking hilarious? If you take what's being said on the Alicesoft Twitter at face value, and they are looking for a potential alternate platform to release an uncut version of Evenicle 2, where do they go? Most English platforms, publicly or not, do have a no lolly rule. Whether or not they enforce it is a separate question, but off the top of my head, I only see 2 potential storefronts who would be 100% able to take the title if Alicesoft wanted. DL Site, which while selling both all-age and adult games is more known for its indie titles than anything mainstream, and Manga Gamer.
You could not live with your own failure. Where did that bring you? Back to me.
So, to end this topic, I have to ask, what did we gain as the end consumer in the switch from a Western localization studio to a localization from the original company in Japan? The word-by-word translation went from being done by a person the hardcore community didn't like in a way the hardcore community didn't like, to being done by a person the hardcore community didn't like in a way the hardcore community didn't like. The game went from being guaranteed to be sold uncut on an okay distribution platform, as well as being sold potentially censored on Steam, to at the time of this video only being guaranteed to be sold censored on Steam. And we also went from not having mosaics to having mosaics. As far as I can see, the end consumer only lost things in this transition, with the only potential gain being the time this localization will take, and even that is up in the air. I want to be a believer in Japanese companies taking the reins on localizations, I really do, but so far, it ain't looking too good. Evenicle 2 has already stumbled right out the gate, Taimen Asagi was barely comprehensible, and they went on to sell a microtransaction-filled flip card game in the West, rather than the more interesting Taimen RPGX mobile game. The only project I've heard good things about was Venus Blood Frontier, a game I still need to cover eventually, and even that one stumbled out of the gate just like Evenicle 2 did. Simply put, this isn't what I expected, and I am pretty disappointed. But hey, the ball is in Alicesoft's court, they released their demo, they got their data, let's see what they do with it. Now here's Happy Me talking about the game itself.
Oh, banana.
Holy shit, that's a big disclaimer. I'm gonna be honest here, when I first heard about Evenicle 2 being a thing in Japan, and that it wasn't a continuation of the adventure of our Lord and Savior Kath and her harem-owning boyfriend Aster, I was more than a little bit put off, but hey, it still had Nanya Higashi's amazing art, and hopefully the writing would still contain that Alicesoft charm.
Yeah, boy.
It's all there in spades. That very unique brand of lewd comedy that, rather than coming across as overly crude and raunchy, feels like more the natural progression from an ecchi anime. This stuff is why Alicesoft is my favorite eroge company. No other developer has gotten just the right blend of comedy and hentai that I crave for. Sure, some can get close, but none of them can pull off Alicesoft's unearthly ability to take literally any genre, slap some pornographic paint on it, and somehow blend that shit together to look like a Picasso painting of a girl rocking a pair of F-cups, taking the term slapstick comedy to a whole other level. This company is just... The main character, Alex, almost immediately came across as more interesting compared to the first game's protagonist. Whether or not that will hold throughout the entire game, who knows. But while Evenicle 1's Asterisk was a country bumpkin, Alex is a country bumpkin who made his way through med school. Respect. Playing as a doctor is a really cool choice because it gives the game a bunch of medical themed side mechanics on top of the already established RPG mechanics from the first game. See, in this new version of the world of Evenicle, people who fight monsters do so using skills, but those skills come at a price. With every use, their bodies become gradually less resistant to illness and disease, an affliction generally known as hero syndrome. Getting sick via hero syndrome can quickly become catastrophic, as the illness can no longer be permanently cured, simply resurfacing after a period of time. This results in heroes becoming sicker and sicker with every passing day they fight, until eventually their bodies are overrun with illness and they just give out. It's actually kind of horrifying if you think about it. An entire life of blood, sweat, tears, and war, and your only reward is knowing that a rusty nail, a bad bowl of food, or simply a stray cough could spell the end of you. Here's a moment of a heroine almost blowing her metaphorical load by simply holding hands with Alex. But don't worry, Alex has the healing touch, and by touch I mean he can diagnose cute girls with his hands and cure them with his penis. Okay, so this is a last second inclusion, and I mean literal cancel the render, let me throw this in last second inclusion. So I noticed some people on the Steam page were confused about this particular CG, and no, it is not censored for the Steam version. This is just, Alicesoft giving you a taste of the fan service when you diagnose someone, but not giving you the full fan service until it's cured. Just thought I'd throw this little bit in here to alleviate some confusion I think some people are feeling right now. Gameplay wise, you have a brand new MP gauge exclusively used for Alex's healing skills, and the new hero syndrome counter that fills up the longer you take in battle, encouraging the player to defeat enemies as quickly as possible, lest their party get bogged down by a bunch of different debuffs. Cool stuff, and the demo even showed that some of the illnesses can have some beneficial effects in combat, meaning that hopefully there is a nice variety of Alicesoft themed diseases to discover throughout the game. The demo lasted me about 8 hours and covers the entire first chapter of the game, a good bit of content to see how everything works and to get a feel for the characters, but something that did surprise me was the lack of eroge content early on. I mean, the first game grabbed your head and just shoved your face into the eroge almost immediately, a style also reflected in other Alicesoft properties, but here it was a bit of a wait for that first H scene. Partially because the actual first H scene was cut out from the Steam demo. It picks up a bit faster after the second scene though, as well as showing another difference from Eve 1 to 2, because it seems in this world, Mother Eve doesn't give two fucks about infidelity, and Alex is apparently free to bed as many people as he pleases with no repercussions. So I guess instead of, I want to be a bigger hero in order to obtain a bigger harem, it's just, I want to cure the world and it just so happens that the cure is in my pants. And not a bad idea, simply different. The heroines are okay, I guess. I mean, Kano honestly has the crowning achievement of having one of the few 8 scenes in eroge that I didn't skip a single line of, so there's that, she might be the best girl for me. But Yuragi kinda feels like a discount Ramius, except swap the perversion with innocence. and their relationship doesn't come across nearly as cute as Rami's and Asker's did. I mean, those two felt like they could truly complete each other. Yuragi does have her moments though, so I could still warm up to her over time.
すごいですよ、アレクさん。そうなのですか。だったら私がいろいろな病気にかかって子作りをすれば。頑張ります。
One interesting thing was that some of the characters are seemingly not drawn by non-Yaigashi. Like from what I've heard, Masquerade is one of them, but it also looks like Chorus might be. Not a big thing, but while I'm sure Eve 1 also had some people do some characters, I don't remember any of them standing out as much as these two do. Combat feels a bit harder in Evenicle 2, with more frequent encounters and obviously the hero syndrome to consider. Throughout my time with the demo, I kept forgetting to top myself off at towns while I progressed through the story, and it actually ended up messing me up as fights knocked off quite a bit of HP off my units. And the first time I ran into an elite enemy, I got yeeted out of the fight faster than the time it took the game to load it. A nice feature is that you don't need to select an enemy if it's the last one. Convenience like that really helps deal with the burnout repetitive RPG combat can have on players. Evenicle's combat has always been a step up to me in that regard though. I like the idea behind not having mana, instead building charges to use skills. It's something I think more games should experiment with. Some quick things before I wrap this up. Gal monster capturing makes a return, and it's explicit enough that I'm not going to risk showing the one I got. There is an apparel slot in the equipment, so maybe there are more alternate outfits in this game, maybe? And as long as you don't take the final cutscene, you can explore the entire Chapter 1 area, which has plenty of collectibles, fun jokes, wife scenes, and even some side H content in it. All in all, the Evenicle 2 clinical trial was amazing. For the low price of free, I got an experience more content rich than some indie H games that you can pay for. And to think this is only a small slice of what Evenicle 2 has to offer. Here's hoping that the localization goes well, because it would be a shame for this fantastic game to be spoiled by the scars of removed content. But who knows, the full localization is probably a long time away, but I'm hopeful for what the future holds in store for this title. If you haven't checked it out, I recommend you do so, and with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Mata ne.